Down to the Viridian station hung in the silent dark like a silver seed pod, orbiting the swirling amber clouds of Kalos Prime. It was a place of truce, a neutral meeting ground where beings from 100 worlds came to trade, talk, and sometimes just watch each other. Humans had only been part of this galactic dance for 30 years, but they had already made a name for themselves, not with weapons, but with words. And no human used words better than Daniel Hayes. Daniel wasn't a soldier. He wasn't a spy. He was a diplomat, and he wore his role like a second skin, tall with tired eyes that still managed to smile. He moved through the station's crowded corridors with quiet confidence. He knew how to listen. More importantly, he knew how to make others feel heard. That night, he stood in the central atrium beneath a dome of reinforced crystal that showed the slow turn of the gas giant below. Around him, delegates from the Zenthari collective clicked their mandibles in polite conversation. Phelan diplomats shimmered in robes woven from light-sensitive thread. And even a few Krell officers stood stiffly near the refreshment tables, their armored hides gleaming under the soft lamps. The occasion was simple, the signing of a new trade agreement between the Terran Alliance and 3 minor rim systems. Nothing grand, nothing flashy, but for Daniel, every handshake, every signed page was a brick in a bridge he hoped would one day span the whole galaxy. He had spent the last 6 months building trust with the Krell delegation, especially their young attaché, Varn. They had shared meals, debated history, even argued about music. Daniel had played Varn an old Earth song, something slow with a piano and a voice that sounded like rain on rooftops. Varn had tilted his head, confused at first, then quiet. It carries sadness, he'd said, but also hope. Daniel had smiled. That's the point. Now, as the ceremony ended and guests began to mingle, Daniel accepted a small cup of synth tea from a service drone. He nodded to Lisa Morgan, his cultural aide, who gave him a thumbs up from across the room. She was sharp, quick, and always watching. She'd warned him twice this week about increased Krell military chatter on open channels, but Daniel had brushed it off. They're nervous, he'd told her. Change scares them. We just have to show them we're not here to replace their world, just to share ours. He didn't see the figure slip in through the Eastern Service corridor. Cloaked in a thermal dampening suit that blurred its outline, the operative moved like smoke. It carried no visible weapon, only a small disc no larger than a human palm, sealed in a magnetic casing. The disc was a pulse charge, designed not to explode outward but inward, collapsing everything within a 3-meter radius into superheated plasma before vanishing without a trace. Clean, quiet, deniable. The operative paused near a support column, just 10 meters from where Daniel stood laughing at something a Zenthari delegate had said. Its gloved hand pressed the disc against the floor. A soft click. A 3-second timer. Daniel turned, sensing something, maybe a shift in the air, maybe just instinct. His eyes met the shadowed shape for less than a heartbeat. He didn't shout. He didn't run. He simply stepped forward, placing himself between the unknown threat and the cluster of delegates behind him. Then the world folded in on itself. Light swallowed sound. The atrium floor buckled. Glass rained down in slow motion. Bodies were thrown like leaves in a storm. When the silence returned, it was heavier than before. Smoke curled from the crater where the disc had detonated. In the center of it, Daniel Hayes lay still, his face calm as if he'd only just closed his eyes for a nap. Chaos followed. Alarms blared. Security drones swarmed. Medics rushed in, but they knew before they reached him, he was gone. Lisa Morgan pushed through the crowd, her breath catching in her throat. She knelt beside him, her hand hovering over his chest, though she already knew. Her eyes scanned the room, sharp and cold now. She saw the scorched patch on the floor. She saw the lack of shrapnel. This wasn't an accident. This was murder. Within the hour, Viridian Station was locked down. The Krell delegation vanished from their quarters. Their ship, the Iron Maw, had already jumped to warp before station security could issue a hold order. The hegemony's official statement came less than 2 hours later, broadcast across all public channels. We mourn the tragic loss of Ambassador Hayes. Our investigation suggests a faulty power conduit caused the incident. The Krell hegemony extends its deepest condolences to the Terran people. But Lisa wasn't fooled. Neither was Paul Dawson, the historian who had been reviewing archival footage in the station's records wing. He'd captured the last seconds on a backup feed. The blur, the disc. The way Daniel had moved, not away but toward the danger. Paul sent the file straight to Earth Command, encrypted and triple-wrapped. On Earth, the news hit like a tidal wave. Cities fell quiet. Schools paused. In Washington, the Terran Council convened an emergency session. Some members demanded immediate retaliation. Others called for sanctions. But the council chair, an old woman named Eleanor Briggs, sat silently for a long time before speaking. "We will respond," she said, her voice steady, "but not as they expect." Back on Viridian Station, Lisa stood alone in the ruined atrium. The cleanup crews had removed the debris, but the scorch mark remained, a dark circle on the polished floor. She placed a single white flower there, something earth-grown, smuggled in her personal kit. Then she turned and walked away, her mind already racing ahead. Daniel had believed in dialogue, in understanding, but even he had known that some doors only opened when you showed you weren't afraid to knock. The galaxy waited for humanity's next move. Most expected warships. They expected fire. What they didn't expect was silence, and in that silence, something far more dangerous began to grow. Not anger, but purpose. The kind that doesn't shout. The kind that builds. The kind that remembers. Part 2I. 17 days passed after the death of Daniel Hayes, and Earth said nothing more. No angry speeches. No fleet movements. No emergency broadcasts to the stars. Just silence. That silence spread through the galaxy like a cold wind, making every alien leader uneasy. The Krell hegemony had expected humans to scream for revenge or beg for justice. They had prepared for both. But this quiet? This was something they could not predict. On Krell Prime, the ruling council met behind sealed doors. Their war ministers paced, claws tapping against metal floors. "They are planning something," one growled. "No species loses a diplomat and stays quiet." Another shook his head. "Maybe they are weak. Maybe they accept our story." But even he did not sound sure. Outside the council chamber, Krell citizens whispered in the streets. Some believed the official report. Others had seen the raw footage leaked by Viridian Station workers. Footage showing the blur, the disc, the way Hayes had stepped forward. Doubt once planted was hard to pull out. Far away in the crystalline cities of the Valen Enclave, elders gathered in their light-filled halls. They watched human data streams closely. Humans had always been loud, fast, emotional. Now they were still. The Valen did not understand it, but they respected it. "A storm that does not roar is the one that drowns you," said Elder Mira, her voice chiming like glass. The Xanthari Collective, with their hive-linked minds, shared a single thought across 1,000 ships. The humans are not reacting. They are preparing. But on Earth, the silence was not empty. Beneath it, the planet hummed with quiet energy. In Washington, in Nairobi, in Jakarta, in Buenos Aires, people worked. Not soldiers. Not spies. Teachers, poets, engineers, musicians, archivists, and students. They gathered in libraries, studios, labs, and community centers. They did not build bombs. They built something else. Lisa Morgan led the effort from a small office in Geneva. She had returned from Viridian Station with Daniel's notes, his voice recordings, his favorite books. She sat with Paul Dawson, who had spent his life studying how humans remembered their dead, not with monuments of stone, but with stories, songs, and shared moments. "They killed a man who believed in connection," Paul said one evening, rubbing his tired eyes. "So we will show them what connection looks like." They called the project the Beacon, not a weapon, not a threat, a message. But not just any message. It would be a mirror, showing the galaxy not what humans could destroy, but what they had built, what they loved, what they mourned, and what they hoped for. Lisa reached out to artists, historians, scientists, and ordinary people. She asked for one thing: truth. In Mumbai, a school teacher sent a video of her students singing an old folk song under monsoon rain. In Oslo, a violinist recorded a piece he had played at his daughter's wedding. In Lagos, a doctor shared footage from a field hospital. Hands stitching wounds, voices calming the scared, eyes that never gave up. From Kyoto came a tea ceremony filmed in dawn light. From Rio, a street dancer's joyful leaps against a sunset sky. And from Daniel's hometown in Oregon, his sister sent a recording of wind through pine trees, the sound he used to fall asleep to as a boy. Every piece was chosen carefully. No propaganda, no lies, just life, real messy, beautiful human life. They included Daniel's final speech at Viridian Station where he had said, "Peace is not the absence of conflict. It is the presence of trust." They added Maya Angelou reading her poem about rising. They added Beethoven's Ninth, not for its grandeur, but for its chorus singing "All Men Become Brothers." They even included grainy footage from Earth's past, firefighters running into burning towers, volunteers handing out water after earthquakes, strangers hugging at airports after long wars ended. Paul worked with linguists to translate everything into over 200 known alien dialects. Not just words, but meaning. The team built emotional context so that a Xanthari could understand why a mother's lullaby mattered, or why a simple handshake between old enemies could change history. Lisa insisted on one rule: nothing fake. If it hurt to watch, they kept it. If it made you cry, they kept it. If it made you proud to be human, they kept it. Meanwhile, Earth's military stood down. Ships returned to port. Training exercises paused. The Terran Council refused all interviews. When a Krell envoy demanded a meeting, they were told, "We are in mourning." That was all. No anger, no blame. Just grief held close like a secret. The galaxy watched, confused. The Krell grew more nervous. Their spies reported no weapons development, no fleet buildup, only data streams flowing between human cities, only quiet meetings, only people carrying boxes of old films, photographs, and handwritten letters into secure buildings. What were they doing? On the 18th day, the answer came. Deep space transmitters hidden in asteroid belts, on lunar outposts, and aboard civilian freighters activated all at once. A signal, clean, strong, and impossible to block, shot out in every direction. It carried no threat, no demand, just a gift. The beacon had launched. The first beings to receive it were traders near the Orion Spur. They opened the file out of curiosity. Within minutes, they stopped working. They gathered in groups, watching human children laugh, listening to voices speak of love and loss, seeing hands plant trees in scorched earth. One old Xanthari trader wept, something his species rarely did, and whispered, "They are not monsters. They are mirrors." On Krell Prime, the signal breached firewalls within hours. The hegemony tried to shut it down, but it was too late. The beacon had been designed to spread like a seed. Every ship that received it became a new transmitter. Every station that played it shared it further. Even Krell citizens with basic comms units found the files. A young Krell student watched a clip of Daniel Hayes teaching a group of alien children how to fold paper cranes. He turned to his friend and said, "Why would anyone kill a man like that?" Back on Earth, Lisa stood on a hill outside Geneva watching the stars. She did not smile. She did not cheer. She simply stood there, feeling the weight of what they had sent into the dark. It was not revenge. It was remembrance, and sometimes remembrance is louder than war. The galaxy held its breath. The stars waited, and for the first time in centuries, many began to wonder if strength could look like kindness, if courage could sound like a lullaby, and if the most powerful weapon was not a gun, but a story. Part 3. The beacon spread faster than anyone expected. Within hours, it reached every major trade route, every listening post, every private ship with a working receiver. It did not ask for permission. It simply arrived like sunlight through a window and filled the silence with voices. Human voices. Laughing, crying, singing, speaking. Not in anger, but in honesty. On the Xanthari homeworld, hive mind clusters paused their endless calculations. For the first time in generations, individual Xanthari broke from the collective thought stream to watch alone. They saw a human grandmother teaching her grandson how to bake bread, her hands dusted with flour, her voice warm with patience. One young Xanthari named Kess replayed the clip 10 times. "Why do they share this?" he asked his elder. "Because they want us to see them as they are," came the reply. "Not as enemies, not as tools, as people." In the Velon Enclave, the crystalline beings gathered in their resonance chambers. They did not have eyes, but they felt light and sound as emotion. When Beethoven's music played through their harmonic receivers, their entire city pulsed with soft blue waves, a sign of deep sorrow and awe. Elder Mira transmitted a single message to Earth. "You have shown us your soul. We will not forget." But the real storm began inside the Krell hegemony. At first, the ruling council ordered all citizens to delete the beacon files. They called it Terran emotional warfare. They claimed it was fake, designed to weaken Krell resolve. But orders could not stop curiosity. Soldiers in remote outposts watched clips on smuggled datapads. Factory workers shared links in hidden chat rooms. School children whispered about the human who folded paper birds and smiled at aliens. One night in the capital city of Krell Prime, a young officer named Jorak sat alone in his quarters. He had been part of the security detail at Viridian Station. He had seen Daniel Hayes speak. He remembered how the human had treated even the lowest-ranking Krell with respect. Now Jorak played the beacon on a small screen. He watched Hayes' final speech. Then he listened to a man named Martin Luther King Jr., whose words had been included in the archive. "Darkness cannot drive out darkness," the voice said. "Only light can do that." Jorak sat very still. His claws, usually clenched in readiness, relaxed. For the first time, he questioned what his leaders had told him. If humans were so dangerous, why did they send beauty instead of bullets? If they were liars, why did their grief feel so real? He was not alone. Across the hegemony, others felt the same. A poet in the southern provinces wrote verses comparing the beacon to a seed planted in stone. A scientist leaked internal logs showing that the Iron Talon, a secret branch of the Krell military, had ordered the hit on Hayes. The logs proved it was not an accident. It was murder, approved at the highest levels. The leak spread like fire. Protests erupted in cities that had never seen dissent. Krell citizens, raised to obey without question, now stood in public squares holding signs made of scrap metal and light panels. One sign read, "We deserve the truth." Another, "Hayes died for peace." Did we kill it too? The ruling council panicked. They arrested the scientist. They shut down public networks. But the beacon had already rooted itself in the minds of millions. Even Krell soldiers began to hesitate. When ordered to fire on protesters, some lowered their weapons. "They are our people," one sergeant said, "not the enemy." Back on Earth, Lisa Morgan watched the reports with quiet hope. She had not expected this. She had only wanted the galaxy to see Daniel as he truly was, a man who believed in bridges, not walls. But the beacon had done more. It had cracked open a system built on fear. Paul Dawson worked day and night with linguists to add new layers to the transmission. When they heard about the Krell protests, they included a message in the Krell tongue. "We do not blame your people. We blame the lie that divided us." They also added footage of Krell children from old trade missions, playing with human kids, sharing toys, laughing without knowing borders. The Zenthari Collective, moved by what they had seen, offered to host an emergency tribunal. The Valen Enclave agreed to provide neutral judges. Even the nomadic drift clans, who rarely involved themselves in politics, sent word. Let truth be heard. The Krell Council tried to refuse, but their own people turned against them. Jorak, the young officer, went public. He stood before a crowd of thousands and held up a data chip containing the full Iron Talon orders. "This is not honor," he said, his voice shaking but clear. "This is shame, and we must face it." His words were broadcast across the hegemony. Within a day, 3 council members resigned. The rest were forced to agree to the tribunal. They had no choice. The beacon had not attacked their ships or their cities. It had attacked their lies, and lies, once exposed, cannot stand. On Viridian Station, now under joint Zenthari-Valen guard, Lisa arrived to prepare for the hearings. She walked through the atrium where Daniel had died. The scorch mark was still there, but now flowers grew around it, planted by visitors from a dozen worlds. A small plaque read, "Here stood a man who chose to listen." She touched the plaque gently. She did not feel victory. She felt responsibility. The beacon had opened a door. Now humanity had to walk through it, not with pride but with care. Across the stars, civilizations watched. They had expected humans to burn the hegemony to ash. Instead, humans had handed them a mirror. And in that mirror, many saw not monsters but themselves, flawed, hurting, but capable of change. The tribunal would begin soon. But the real work had already started, not in courtrooms but in hearts, not with force but with truth. And for the first time, the galaxy wondered if peace was not a dream, but a choice, and if humans of all beings had just shown them how to make it. Part 4. The tribunal began on Viridian Station, now renamed the Hayes Concord Hub by unanimous vote of the attending systems. The chamber was not grand or intimidating. It was simple. White walls, soft lighting, and a circular table where representatives from 12 civilizations sat as equals. At its center stood a single empty chair, draped with a woven cloth from Earth. It was Daniel Hayes's seat. He would not speak, but his presence filled the room. Lisa Morgan sat for Earth, her hands folded, her expression calm. Across from her sat Jorak, now the voice of the new Krell Provisional Council. His armor was gone. He wore plain gray robes, a sign of humility. He did not look at Lisa at first. He stared at the empty chair, as if expecting Daniel to walk in and take his place. The Xanthari presided, their collective mind ensuring fairness. The Valen recorded every word in light script, preserving truth in crystal form. Evidence was presented, not just the beacon files, but the Iron Talon logs, the security footage from Viridian, and testimony from Krell officers who had defied orders to speak. One by one, the lies of the old regime crumbled. Jorak rose to speak on the third day. His voice was quiet but steady. We were taught that humans were reckless, he said, that they spread like fire, burning everything they touched. But the beacon showed us something else. It showed us humans planting trees in burned fields. It showed them holding each other after loss. It showed them sharing their pain so others would not feel alone. He paused, then looked directly at Lisa. We killed a man who offered us his hand, and you answered by showing us your heart. That is a kind of strength we did not understand. The room was silent. Even the Xanthari's usual clicking stopped. Lisa nodded slowly. She did not smile. She did not thank him. She simply said, Daniel believed you were worth the risk. The tribunal's verdict came quickly. The former Krell Council was declared guilty of conspiracy, murder, and violation of galactic diplomatic law. They would face justice in their own reformed courts. The Iron Talon was disbanded. All records of its operations were to be made public. Reparations would be paid, not in credits but in open archives, shared technology, and joint peace academies. But the most surprising part came after the verdict. The Valen Enclave proposed a new agreement, the Concord Pact. It would guarantee diplomatic immunity for all envoys, create a shared emergency response network, and establish cultural exchange programs across member worlds. The Xanthari added a clause. Any act of violence against a diplomat would be treated as an attack on all signatories. One by one, the civilizations agreed. Even the Drift clans, who had never signed anything before, placed their mark, a swirl of stardust captured in a vial on the document. When it was Earth's turn, Lisa did not reach for a pen. She placed a small terracotta tile, hand-painted by students in Daniel's hometown, onto the table. This is how we signed, she said. With something made by hands, not machines. Jorak watched her. Then he reached into his robe and pulled out a smooth black stone from Krell Prime, the kind used in their oldest peace rituals. He set it beside the tile. And this is how we remember, he said. News of the pact spread fast. On Earth, people gathered in parks and plazas, not cheering, but talking. In schools, teachers played clips from the tribunal. Children asked questions like, why did they think we were bad? And can we visit Krell now? In Nairobi, a group of artists began painting a mural of Daniel Hayes, standing between a human child and a Krell child, both holding paper cranes. On Krell Prime, the changes were slower, but real. Old statues of warlords were taken down. New schools opened with lessons in human history and ethics. Jorak visited factories and barracks not as a commander, but as a listener. He told them about the beacon. He played them the song Daniel had shared with him, the one that sounded like rain on rooftops. Some Krell wept, others sat in silence, but all listened. Meanwhile, the beacon kept broadcasting, not as a weapon, but as a library. New civilizations asked to join the signal. A small moon colony of methane breathers sent their own archive in return. Songs made of bubbling gas and shifting tides. Humans added it to the stream. The exchange grew. Paul Dawson traveled to the Valen Enclave to help build the Memory Vault, a place where the beacon and all future cultural gifts would be stored forever. He worked alongside Valen archivists, teaching them how humans use stories to heal. In return, they showed him how light could hold memory for thousands of years. You do not need stone to remember, one Valen told him. You only need to care enough to keep looking. Back on Earth, Eleanor Briggs, the Terran Council chair, gave her first public address since Daniel's death. She stood on a balcony in Geneva with the Hayes Concord hub visible in the night sky as a tiny bright star. We did not win a war, she said, We chose a different path, and the galaxy walked it with us. She ended not with a promise of power, but a question. What will we build together now? The answer came in small ways. Human engineers helped repair Krell water purifiers damaged in old conflicts. Krell botanists sent drought-resistant seeds to Earth's dry regions. Centauri medics shared healing techniques with human doctors. The Velan taught light weaving to human artists. Trust grew not in grand gestures, but in daily acts of giving. Lisa returned to Viridian Station often. She would sit in the atrium, sometimes alone, sometimes with Jorak. They never spoke much. They just watched the stars turn over Kalos Prime. Once Jorak asked her, "Do you think he would be proud?" Lisa looked at the flowers still blooming around the scorch mark and said, "I think he'd be surprised we listened to each other long enough to try." The galaxy had expected fire. Instead, it got a seed, and seeds given time and care grow into forests. Farsuer. 1 year after the death of Daniel Hayes, the rebuilt Viridian Station glowed softly against the amber clouds of Kalos Prime. It was no longer just a trade hub. It was a home for something new. The Hayes-conquered hub now housed classrooms, gardens, and a great hall where diplomats from 23 civilizations met not to argue borders, but to share stories. On this day, the hall was full, not with soldiers or spies, but with teachers, artists, farmers, and students. They had come to witness the signing of the Concord Pact's final chapter, a promise not just to avoid war, but to build peace together. Lisa Morgan stood near the front, wearing a simple blue dress made from fabric woven in a village in Peru. Beside her stood Jorak, his gray robes now edged with silver thread, a Krell symbol of earned trust. Between them rested a low table. On it lay the Concord Scroll, written in light, sound, and touch so every species could read it in their own way. Around the room, representatives waited. The Centauri hummed softly. The Velan shimmered in calm anticipation. Even the Drift clans had sent a delegation, their bodies wrapped in living mist. Paul Dawson stood at the back, watching. He had not expected to live to see this. He remembered the days after Daniel's death, the fear, the rage, the silence. Now he saw something rarer than victory, understanding. He caught Lisa's eye and gave a small nod. She returned it. No words were needed. The ceremony began not with speeches, but with music. A human cellist played a slow, deep melody. Then a Krell wind carver joined in, shaping notes from air and stone. A Centauri added rhythmic pulses through their shell. The sounds did not clash. They wove together like roots growing side by side. Then it was time to sign. One by one, each civilization added their mark. The Centauri pressed a living spore into the scroll. It would grow into a plant that bloomed only in times of peace. The Velan cast a beam of light that became a permanent thread in the document. The Drift clans released a drop of liquid starlight that floated and merged with the others. When it was Earth's turn, Lisa did not step forward alone. She was joined by a young girl named Maya, age 10, from Daniel's hometown. Maya carried a small terracotta sculpture, a human hand holding a Krell claw, both reaching toward a single star. She placed it gently on the table. "My class made this," she said, her voice clear despite the crowd. "We wanted to show that friends can be different and still hold on." Jorak looked at the sculpture, then at Maya. He knelt, something no Krell leader had ever done in public, and said, "Thank you." Then he placed his own offering, a seed from the first Krell tree planted on Earth, now growing in a park in Nairobi. "From your soil," he said, "to our memory." After the signing, Paul Dawson was asked to speak. He walked to the center slowly, his hands in his pockets. He looked out at the faces, scaly, crystalline, gaseous, fleshy, all turned toward him with quiet attention. "We did not answer violence with violence," he began. "We answered it with memory, with beauty, with truth. That is our strength." He paused, then added, "Daniel Hayes did not die for peace. He lived for it. And now so do we." The words spread beyond the hall. They were carried on the beacon, now a permanent galactic archive. They were translated, shared, and taught. On Earth, children learned about the Concord Pact in school. On Krell Prime, new officers studied Daniel's speeches before taking their oaths. In the outer systems, traders played the signing ceremony music during long jumps through dark space. But the real change happened in small moments. A human engineer helped a Krell farmer fix a broken irrigation drone. A Xanthari poet wrote verses about a Velan child learning to dance. A Drift Clan navigator guided a lost human ship to safety without asking for payment. These were not grand events. They were just people choosing kindness over fear. Lisa returned to Earth a month later. She visited Daniel's grave in Oregon. She brought soil from Krell Prime and mixed it with the Earth there. Then she planted a sapling, a hybrid tree grown from seeds of both worlds. As she patted the dirt, she whispered, "We're trying." Back on the Concord hub, Jorak started a new program, the Bridge Builders. Young humans and Krell would live together for a year, learning each other's languages, foods, and dreams. The first group included Maya, the girl who had brought the sculpture. She wrote letters home about how her Krell roommate taught her to carve stone, and how she taught him to braid hair. "He laughs like Uncle Dan," she wrote. Quiet, but real. The galaxy watched. At first, many still expected humans to slip back into old ways, to grow proud, to demand more, to forget. But they did not. Instead, they kept sharing. They sent more songs, more recipes, more stories of ordinary courage. They asked questions instead of making demands. They listened more than they spoke. Other species began to do the same. The Valen opened their light libraries to all. The Xanthari offered their hive mind archives for peaceful research. Even former rivals started small exchanges, sending seeds, art, or greetings on quiet channels. Years passed. The Conquered Pact grew. More worlds joined. Conflicts still happened, but now there were ways to talk before fighting. Mediators trained in the Hayes method, listening first, judging later, became common. The beacon became a school, not just a message, and through it all, Daniel Hayes was not remembered as a victim. He was remembered as a beginning, a spark that showed a different way. On the 5th anniversary of his death, every world in the Conquered lit a single light at the same moment. From Earth cities to Krell's mountain towers, from Xanthari hives to Velan spires, the darkness filled with soft, steady glow. No words were spoken. None were needed. The stars, once expecting fire, now saw something else, a species that turned grief into grace, and in doing so, taught the galaxy that the strongest thing in the universe is not a weapon, but a hand held out in trust.